What is up, guys? Phaedo82 coming at you with some raid cam footage from the US Rustopia server, where three clans have banded together, pooling resources and manpower in one location and amassing probably the largest raid team that I've ever seen in Rust. It is the LQM clan, Dirt McGirt's crew, and the Yar clan. There might be some other hired guns in the mix, but these are the three main clans. They're rolling out in force towards the compound of a rival clan that they intend to raid, and as always, they're using best practices and they're building a raid base or a staging base. I've said it before and I'll say it again, you guys always want to build a staging base when you're going to raid. It's absolutely essential because raids rarely go as planned. You want a place where you can store gear at so you don't have to carry it all with you, and a place where you can respawn at and rejoin the fight if you have to. You can see here the members are placing down sleeping bags, chests, and a building cabinet, which are absolutely essential features of a raid base. And this sprawling compound is a target the raiders intend to raid. It's constructed by Murdoch, who you might remember from previous editions of Rust Cribs. He's a very experienced base builder and also an experienced raider, so he knows how to design bases that can be defended against. Murdoch has at least one member on guard duty, so it looks like it's going to be an active raid. And one of Murdoch's men who was out scouting spotted a tower that was constructed during the dead of night during the last night on the Rustopia server. This is a tower that was constructed by the raiders, and it serves a few different purposes. It allows them to have a spawn point closer to the compound they're going to be raiding, but it's also a battlement in which they can overlook the compound from the hill, and they can send suppressing fire back down to the compound while the main raid team moves in. Here we can see the main raid team moving down towards the compound. They're sending some rockets towards the base, but they are missing the walls, and they have the trajectory of the rockets off a little bit. So they're actually wasting about 4 to 5 rockets by having that trajectory off, and that's something that you want to take note of. They're using quite a bit of rockets before they even get into the main compound, so it looks as though they're having somebody use the rocket launcher who might not be as experienced with it as perhaps other players and doesn't understand the range of the rockets. With that being said, they're still landing shots on the wall and they're starting to make their way in. They can raid this base, or breach the wall rather, one of two ways. They can send a rocket directly through the wall, which it looks like what they're trying to do, or they could blow off one of the lips at the top, the ledges at the top, and ladder up over it. It would be less resource intensive to blow off one of the floor tiles and ladder up over it, but it looks like they have enough rockets to spare and they're actually going to go straight in through the wall. When a raid team's moving into a compound like this and they are rolling out with a lot of supplies, they always want to be careful about managing those supplies in a way where they're not sort of blowing the lion's share of it before they get to the heart of the base. I'm not sure how many rockets they have or how much C4 they have, but they've already used a substantial amount and they've just now breached the wall. So it's something that might not have been the best move. They're now on the inside of the compound. You'll notice that like World War Rustopia, there are many buildings in this compound and it's going to be hard for the raiders to decide which one to hit. It looks like they're staying focused initially and they are hitting targets in sync with one another, so the communication appears to be good among the raid team. The defenders are doing exactly what they should. They're keeping cool and they're staying inside the base for the most part. There is one defender down here probably trying to get a read on the number of raiders, but in a situation like this, the defenders want to stay in the base because they do still have the home field advantage. Well, it might seem like the raid team has the power here, and they certainly are blowing through things left and right with rockets. The defenders still know the layout of this base. They know where the choke points are, and because they constructed the compound, they know where their loot is, and they know what places they need to protect versus which ones they don't. Whereas for the raiders, it's more of a crapshoot as to which bases they're going to hit. With that being said, the raiders are firing rockets with wild abandon, and they're blowing shit apart. It's really amazing to see this during this time period on the server. Like I said before, usually we see this stuff towards the end of a wipe cycle on the Rustopia server. These clans, however, pooled a lot of resources together, and they are bringing the fight to Murdoch and his crew. You'll notice a lot of fire back and forth between the defenders and the raiders. This is typical of a raid of this magnitude, and both sides are doing exactly what they need to do. The raiders are pushing forward, they're not stopping, and they're not getting caught up in chatter about which bases they should hit. They seem to have very good direction up to this point, which is something that doesn't happen in raids that are sometimes this stressful. Look at the amount of rockets, guys, that are just flying down there. We have to take a bird's eye view for most of this raid because there's so much going on. We can't really have our boots on the ground too much. We really want to capture the magnitude of it. And when we look at it from the perspective of the free cam up in the sky, it really looks almost like a real-time strategy game, or almost like a total war game where the conquerors are trying to capture a city that they're attempting to take over. It's really spectacular to see this. And look at all the tracers and the fire back and forth between the two teams here. Absolutely stunning. You'll notice here how effective rockets are at opening up bases, opening up pathways into bases that previously only would have been able to been opened up with the use of C4. Initially, when rockets were introduced into the game, we didn't think they were going to be a super effective raiding tool, but just about in every raid now, we do see rockets being used. We don't see a lot of the flame rockets being used, the incendiary rockets. It's mostly the normal rockets because they have the highest damage value to the buildings, and the high velocity rockets or the normal rockets are the ones that are being used. I'd love to see some flame rockets being used, but they only appear to be used on modded servers or during raids that are not your typical vanilla raids. So when people are putting resources into building rockets, the ones that are most effective for raids are going to be your normal rockets or your HP high velocity rockets. Taking note here of what's going on, the raiders are breaching one of the main buildings here. One of the defenders is up here doing his best to hold the position, and night has fallen, so the dark of night has set in. This is neither an advantage for the raiders or the defenders. This is bad for both sides. Night obstructs vision on both ends here. You'll notice that it's pitch black. The only source of light that we have are the muzzle flashes, or if somebody happens to light a torch to see what's in front of them. Rust is not a game where you can see in the dark, and it's not a game where you can see, where your fellow players are. They don't glow in green if they're on the same team or anything like that. So it's a very stressful situation. And you'll notice here that it's a good way for the defenders to actually blend in with the raiders. So it's a tactical advantage in some sense to the defenders. The raiders get nothing out of the darkness. You would think that like under most military maneuvers in real life, the dark of night serves some advantage. In Rust, that's actually not the case, and the raiders have actually caught themselves in a situation here where it's very difficult to see what's going on. Initially, I was going to time-lapse this part of the raid, but I wanted to go through it without time-lapsing it because I think it's stunning to see a raid at night. It doesn't happen often, and while it's dark and some things are hard to make out, to see the way that the muzzle flashes are lighting up the landscape here and sort of intermixing with the ambient sounds of the wolves in the background, if you can hear them over my voice and over the gunshots. It's really stunning the way it's all mixing together, and it's something you don't see too often in Rust. So the magnitude of this raid is all the more apparent at night when you see those tracers and those rockets and those explosions and everything just happening in rapid succession. You can really see how much is going on here. Some of that gets lost during the day when everything is bright and vibrant, but at night you can see the full effect of it. Both sides are fighting hard at this point, and there doesn't appear to be anyone who's giving up on the fight. The defenders are fighting back just as hard as the raiders are pushing forward, and the raiders are pushing forward at a really fast rate, and they are just blowing things apart left and right. That's something that I always advise people to do in raids, and it's something that you always want to do. Keep that momentum going. If you stop when you're raiding, if you stop in the middle of a compound and start thinking too much, that's when the raiders tend to lose. It's sort of like, a game of football or something like that. You have to kind of keep pushing ahead and stay on the offensive a lot of times, and that's what the raiders are doing here. The defenders are doing what they need to do too. They're holding their positions, and they're doing a fine and admirable job against a lot of opposition here, against a lot of rockets and a lot of resources. I'll say it again, guys. I've said it just about every raid cam, but raiding is a battle of attrition, and it's really who can out-resource the other team. So you have here a lot of rockets coming in, but the question is, when day comes, will there still be rockets left over, or will the lion's share of the rockets and C4 have been used at night? Again, at night, it's not the best time to see where you're going, so some of the rockets might not be used towards the targets that they really should be used for. So it's an interesting dynamic. But the raid, although it looks like it's going in the favor of the Raiders at this point in time, the tables could turn at any point, and we'll have to see at the end, you know, if there is a clear winner. There might not be, but it's going to be a resource game. So the defenders can always bounce back and start repairing things. It's certainly not going to be something they can patch up all the holes, but if they're able to defend the spots that they need to, where they know their loot is and where they know that the good stuff is, they could still make out okay, even though it looks like they're getting completely shredded at this point in time. And even though it's the dead of night, the Raiders have not stopped the fight, and the defenders have not stopped fighting back. Neither side is giving up, and they're both fighting tooth and nail. Absolutely stunning to see this at night, to see the tracers against the night sky, to hear how they juxtapose with the ambient sounds, and it's a really interesting dynamic and something we don't see a lot in Rust. As you can see here, one of the main bases has been breached, and the defenders are doing their best to fend off the Raiders. It's absolutely impossible to get a count of how many Raiders are in the compound, and the Raiders also can't get a count of how many defenders there are. Everything is pitch black. The only thing lighting up the night sky are the muzzle flashes, or if someone chooses to light a torch. If someone lights a torch, it's a bit of a risky move because it is giving a position away, but it's something that sometimes is necessary to do to see where you're going. You'll notice here that a player lit a torch, and as soon as he lit the torch, you can see the amount of bodies that are starting to pile up on the landscape here. I imagine that when day comes, the landscape will be littered with corpses, and there will be a lot of carnage from the fighting that occurred during the night. This is an absolutely massive raid. There's a lot of stuff going on, and even though it's the dead of night, it appears as though people are still landing shots, and bodies are still dropping to the ground. You notice an airdrop just started to go over the night sky, lighting up the compound a little bit, and dawn is starting to set here. So we see that the night is coming to an end. The raid is still going strong. The base is still relatively intact. It doesn't look as though any raiders breached any main loot areas. And Murdoch's sign, his flag, is still flying high, symbolizing that the fight is still going on here, and he is still staying strong with his group. Day has set in, and you'll notice that as we pan in, there's been an absolute massive amount of destruction that went on during the night. Bases are blown apart. They're absolutely shells of what they used to be. And those rockets were put to good use on the bases in here. They opened up these bases quite a bit. Opened up the bases for the Raiders to have access to loot rooms, and also to give the defenders less places to hide. With that being said, the defenders are still staying strong and firing back from defensive positions. And we can see now, as day has set in, that there are bodies all over the landscape here. This inner compound is absolutely littered with corpses, and they continue to pile up as the fight continues. And taking note of the amount of bodies on the ground, something to bear in mind is that when teams are raiding bases, oftentimes members will carry with them large amounts of supplies. So these bodies could have on them stacks of C4, large stacks of ammo, rockets, anything of that nature. So the bodies are worth looking over, and they are actually very important in large-scale battles like this. So the defenders are picking up the bodies of the Raiders, and they're trying to get what they can off that. If they find any items, they're of course going to use them against the Raiders and bring the fight back to the Raiders. Something to bear in mind, guys, just when raids are occurring like this, if your base is ever getting raided, try to take the fight back to the Raiders. If they have staging bases and if you're able to get to them, it oftentimes will take the fight out of the Raiders and neutralize the threat. If they don't have a spot to respawn back at, and they have to walk back from their main base, they'll oftentimes give up. Panning back out here, we can see that the numbers have thinned out in terms of the raid team, and we also notice that not as many rockets are being used, which leads us to believe the majority of the rockets were used during the night, which isn't surprising considering the amount of rockets that we saw flying through the night sky. Another thing to bear in mind here is that the Raiders are coming back less well geared than they were before, indicating that they're probably running low on resources. They're coming back with melee weapons, they're coming back with bits and pieces of armor, but they're not fully geared with the kits they would usually have. Here we're seeing 2FX and a team of men move to the top of a high peak overlooking the raid. It's unclear as to whether or not they're on the side of the Raiders or the defenders. At this point in time, they're simply taking up an overwatch position and watching the action that's going on. They are dressed like the raid team, but that's a fairly common outfit, so I'm really not sure where their loyalty lies. They could be opportunists and could be waiting to pick off the scraps, so that remains to be seen. Taking a look back at that staging area, back at that battlement that was built, we can see that the Raiders are re-gearing, but again, it's really ragtag at this point. They're putting on bits and pieces of armor and running back to the fight with melee weapons, with stones, with torches, with guns with just a few rounds, and seeing the amount of bodies that is piling up on the inside of the compound is really showing you, the scale of this raid and what's occurring. The body count here might be on par with World War Rustopia. I didn't think anything could come close to that, but I'm seeing just a lot of stuff going on here, and it might be giving that a run for its money. What you're seeing here is some fighting that's going on outside the battlement, that staging base here. So the defenders and the raiders have now taken to melee weapons. They're both running low on resources, it looks like, which is not surprising considered what we saw during the overnight. But the fight is being taken back to the staging base, and while we were looking at the inside of the compound, the defenders actually came out and blew apart that tower that the raiders had built with the rockets that they recovered from the raiders' body. They didn't get a chance to destroy all the sleeping bags, so the raiders can still spawn in, but they did take out a bunch of the loot chests, so probably a lot of loot has been lost, which means the resource game is now coming into effect, where the Raiders are losing some of the resources they had, which might be taking the fight out of them a little bit. What's interesting here is the focus has been taken off of the main compound and it's now on this tower. The Raiders are trying to re-secure this location, they're trying to repair it, they're trying to save what resources are in there, because that was a central point in this battle. With that being said, the main compound has now shifted from being focused on the inner part of the compound to being focused on the wall. The wall has been repaired by the defenders. They've patched up the hole that was blown in with a rocket. They've repaired one of the doors. One of the doorways remains open, and it's now a bit of a choke point. As we've seen in previous raid cams, choke points are absolutely the most crucial part in raids, and now the choke point is one door that's open. So the defenders have control of this compound again by leaving that one door open and re-patching up the wall and putting a door on the other one that was previously blown open. You can see here again the ragtag raiders and defenders that are coming back naked or with one or two pieces of armor on, and it's really speaking to the fact that the raid is slowing down a little bit and it's becoming much more primitive at this point in time. It's back to the Stone Age, and we're not seeing any more rockets or C4 or anything of that nature. Again, look at the amount of bodies that are piling up around this choke point. Absolutely stunning display of force on both sides. And neither side seems to be giving up at this point in time. The Raiders are running back just as quick as they can. The defenders are holding strong at the choke point, and each team is just doing so well in terms of bringing their A game to this raid. We always see this on Rustopia, but the amount of next level shit on here is awesome, and the raids are really stunning. Back at that staging base, that tower, the defenders have come back with some rockets, and they've blown that completely off the map, getting rid of all the sleeping bags, which were the spawn points, and we now see left over a bunch of corpses where that tower used to be. The game is now back focused on that choke point, which the defenders have clear control over at this point in time.
You didn't get to a single loot room, bro. You didn't destroy any of them. You got gunpowder from one base.
Thanks for the free loot.
Oh, thank you.
And the amount of corpus here, guys, just goes to show the amount of players that came together in this one slice of life on the US Rustopia server to fight. If you guys want to get in on the fight, come on and join US Rustopia. The more the merrier. And as we pan out, we see 2FX and his crew over here. Again, unsure as to what their motives are. As always, guys, hope you enjoyed this raid cam. Had a lot of fun making it and recording it. Phaedo 82, peace.